The brawling in Britain over that June Brexit referendum has, you might say, spilled over across the Channel. France's most popular cabinet member, reformist economy minister Emmanuel Macron, warning that should UK voters opt to leave the EU, be braced for a move home of French financial services from the City of London, while he sees, going the other way, the British border post now in Calais, which may have to return back to Blighty. A serious threat? A bluff? Macron's comments to the Financial Times came ahead of a Franco-British summit staged on the World War I battlefields of the Somme in northern France. A reminder of the Entente Cordiale alliance of 100 years ago. What happens to that alliance should Britain leave Europe? The summit coinciding with the dismantling of the jungle, that squatter camp in nearby Calais. And it's clear that Europe's handling of the refugee and migrant crisis will weigh heavily on voters' decisions come June. Is the French handling of the crisis helping or hurting David Cameron's pitch to keep the UK in Europe? One of the questions we'll be broaching today in the France 24 debate as we look at an old relationship once again put to the test. With us, two subjects of Her Gracious Majesty who reside here. Journalist Alex Taylor. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Nice to welcome as well stand-up comedian Amber Minogue. Thank you for being with us. He is a Paris City Council staff member. Bruno Bernard of the Conservative Les Républicains Party.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. And from London, Conservative commentator Alexandra Swan, who's campaigning in favour of a Brexit. Nice to see you again.
Hi, thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Here's what the French economy minister had to say. He said that the day this relationship unravels, migrants will no longer be in Calais. Swift was the response from London's Mayor Boris Johnson, who has sided with the Brexit camp.
And break, as we say in Brussels. Donnez-moi un break. Look, that was agreed by an international treaty between Britain and France, a few years ago. It actually has nothing to do with the EU. You have to wonder about the timing of this particular venture. I think this is all part of a project to try and scare people into wanting to stay in the EU, when actually all the arguments are in favour of us taking back control and being big enough to stand on our own 2 feet.
Yeah, so the argument there, border posts in Calais have nothing to do with the EU. It's a bilateral treaty between France and Britain. Is it an empty threat on the part of the economy minister? And
it's definitely a threat. Is it supposed to help the Brexit campaign? Is it supposed to hurt the Brexit campaign? It's hard to tell. But it sounds as if France would retaliate if Britain was to leave the EU by denouncing that in an international treaty that moved the border, the British border, onto French soil.
And would that be in France's interest?
To move the border back to the UK? Yeah, it would, because I think that it would just get rid of the jungle in Calais for once and for all.
Alex Taylor?
I'm totally mystified by this, because I just don't understand why France would continue to be kind to a country which leaves the European Union. I think the only reason that France pays for the great amount of security that you have to do, all the policemen, all the wires, even the British contribute to that. But the French are basically dealing with a problem, which is the British problem. I mean, there's massive a problem of migration throughout Europe. Britain is taking very, very few refugees, and a few of a very small percentage happen to want to go to Britain for various reasons. But the French are dealing with that problem. If Britain is no longer in the European Union, if Britain leaves the club, I see no reason why the French should continue to pay to protect Britain's borders. Why would they not just say, you want to go to Britain? Goodbye, leave the country. And they go through the Eurotunnel, and Britain would have to deal with all this problem rather than having the problem dealt with. I mean, I totally understand if that's I don't think it's an empty threat at all. I think it's just very realistic. If we leave the European Union, that the French should say, well, this is no longer our problem. Goodbye.
Alexandra Swan?
I think If you think about how this bilateral agreement that has nothing to do with EU membership came about, it was because of a problem that already existed in France with migrant camps trying to come to Britain. It was a treaty designed to actually help France, not Britain. Now, undoubtedly, it would be difficult if France withdrew that specific, end of the treaty. But frankly, it's something that helps both countries. If migrants can go straight to Britain, we would send them straight back because they can legally claim asylum in the first aid country, but also because that will only open the floodgates for yet more migrants trying to get to Britain through France. To say that sort of moving the British borders is actually going to solve the migrant crisis in Calais, I think is false.
Well, it will help in Calais. It won't help Britain, that's for sure. But then it won't be our problem anymore. And I think France will be very happy with that.
Yeah, but I think it's the Touquet agreement which was signed between two members of the European Union. And because people belong to the same club, they agree to cooperate together. If Britain withdrew from the European Union, there wouldn't be this bonne entente between the two countries.
And we could
why should they?
We could see a map there. We could do a map there of the border, and there you see there is the jungle. Just so people understand what's going on right now in Calais, the center of the city, and there are two British border posts, one at the ferry terminals, one at the Eurotunnel, some 300 British customs officers. Alexandra Swan making the point that it would be, it's in France's interest to have those customs officials on the French side.
Well, I don't really see why, because if people want to get to Britain, then what? I mean, they would be able to take the Eurostar. They would be able to go through the tunnel if French policemen weren't stopping them. So it would become a British problem if the French weren't putting out very strong means to protect British borders within France. I can't see that point of view. If Britain was no longer in the European Union, why should France send hundreds of CRS policemen to police British borders in Calais? Why should they do that? Why shouldn't they just say, you're leaving the European Union, goodbye, this is the British problem? I don't get it.
Amber Minogue?
Well, I mean, this is part of the problem. It's not just the jungle, it's a much bigger problem, and Britain should be much more implicated. I mean, so far, their effort has been pretty poor, I'd say.
Alexandra Swan, is Britain getting a free ride when it comes to dealing with the situation in the jungle? We've seen the images in the past couple of days of the French dismantling those squatter camps, which have drawn criticism from all sides. Should Britain be doing more?
Well, today Cameron announced that a further £17 million is going to be given towards helping the French authorities in Calais. So we already contribute a lot towards the cost of maintaining our borders, and arguably we should contribute more. But it's funny how this has only come out today, that this is a risk if Britain chooses to leave the European Union. It's not being promised, and keep in mind this is a minister and the president of France who are likely not going to be in power by the time the UK would actually manage to extricate itself from the European Union. So what they're saying right now really doesn't have that much bearing and really shouldn't be taken as a reason to not vote to leave.
Just to add that Xavier Bertrand, the president of the northern region of France, has made exactly the same threat.
And he's from the Conservative...
And he's from Les Républicains.
Sorry, Les Républicains Party. Yeah.
And who might, who knows, go back into power next year. So, in order to clarify things.
But I think the only solution to this is a genuine European solution, because I mean there are millions of people who are fleeing a zone of conflict, Syria, and I mean when you think that Germany has taken in 1 million people, the only way we're going to sort this out is if Europe comes together and finds some solution. I mean, it's all very well for Britain. I'm British, but I get a bit annoyed when I see Britain as kind of like protected by this channel, saying, sort this problem out, we don't want anything to do with it. We'll pay a little bit more money if you like, but we're not taking... I mean, Britain's taken it says it's going to take 20,000, and today perhaps some unaccompanied children. Germany has taken 1 million. This is a kind of Europe-wide problem, and I think the only solution to this is on a European Union level of getting together and trying to sort out some European solution, rather than people sitting on the edges saying, this is not our problem, here's a bit of money, sort it out yourselves, please, we don't want anything to do with it, which is the British position.
Exactly. They're sort of closing their eyes. If we shut our eyes, maybe Europe will go away. It won't. They're always going to be there. They're always going to need to trade and work with them. And they need to sort of step up and realise that, Europe is there and it needs to be addressed as a European problem.
Alexandra Swan, when you see the President of the European Commission travelling to Greece and to Turkey, when you see that there's going to be that summit with Turkey next week, Europe is the way this is going to be solved?
No, not at all. I think this is, well, it's a worldwide problem. I don't think if anyone knew actually how we were going to fix this problem or something would be being done. It's one of the biggest problems facing Europe and one of the biggest challenges facing, well, the Western world really in a very long time. I think to say that Britain should be doing, shutting their eyes to Europe. I mean, there's no talk, the rhetoric of people who want to stay, have Britain stay within the EU tends to be that we don't like Europe, we don't want to be a part of it. Of course we do. We just don't want to be ruled by Brussels. It's a basic issue of national sovereignty. That doesn't mean we can't work together. It doesn't mean we can't work to overcome massive issues like the migrant crisis. It just means that we want to regain political sovereignty for Britain so we can work together with our European partners, but not be part of a political union.
But if you want to work together with people, then you need to sit down at the table and be part of that discussion. So by moving out of Europe, you're saying, well, I don't want to discuss this, I don't want to be part of this discussion, and therefore, why should you be consulted?
Not at all.
To be fair to Britain, I don't, as you said, I mean, Britain, whether it stays within the EU or not, will still be a part of Europe. So we'll still have to deal with Britain, whether it's a member state or not. So it will still be at the table, to be fair.
But Britain is kind of... I don't understand this argument about sovereignty at all, because Britain doesn't participate in hardly anything to do with the European Union anyway. We're out of Schengen. We've got an opt-out out of the euro. I mean, if you're in a market with 28 countries, there have to be some rules to say about exports and so forth. You can't just be in a free market because everybody will... That's what we had before, will have their own trade agreements bilaterally. So... If the only degree of sovereignty we lose is the fact that there are some common rules which have to be applied by all the countries, that's the only loss of sovereignty we really have.
All right, that brings us to another point that the French economy minister made, Emmanuel Macron, in a reference to Prime Minister Cameron's 2012 offer to roll out the red carpet for French businesses. You'll recall at the time that President Hollande was instituting a temporary 75% tax bracket. Here's what Macron said. If I were to reason like those who roll out red carpets, a dig it seems at Cameron, I would say we might have some repatriations from the city of London. Bruno Bernard, is that going to happen? Those French bankers that are in London and pay their taxes over there?
Very unlikely. That's wishful thinking from the economy minister here, because the financial place in Paris is not doing well, and analysts, business and market analysts, are actually leaving Paris at the moment to go to either London, Singapore or New York. So to see the city of London actually moving back to Paris is...
Right now, the Eurozone's #1 financial center is London. That's where...
which is funny because it's not part of the Eurozone.
And is that going to continue to be the case? Should Britain leave the EU?
Well, I mean, apparently people in the city are very wary about the idea of leaving the EU. But, I mean, they're not part of the Eurozone. And they're doing pretty well by themselves as a financial stronghold.
I find this kind of view very short term. I mean, I'm probably older than most people here, but I came to France at the beginning of the 1980s. Economies go up and down. I was delighted to be able to come to France in the 1980s when, if you remember, there was the winter of discontent. The British economy was the sick man of Europe. I mean, things do go up and down. I don't think the Eurozone, which has had huge problems, nobody could possibly deny that, but maybe in 10 or 20 years, maybe British people will be happy to come like I was 30 years ago to find a stronger economy on the continent. By organising Brexit, we're taking away the possibility that I had to go and live and work in another European country, and that 2 million British people, that's never said, 2 million British people, because migration...
How will it take away that opportunity?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. That's the whole point. I mean, I'm freaking out. On Saturday, I am, for the first time, I've been here for 37 years, and for the first time, I am going to take a test of my French so that I can become French. Nobody has ever said to me... thank you, merci beaucoup. Nobody has ever said to me what's going to happen to expats. Free movement in the British media is always treated if it only happens into Britain. But there are 2 million British people who live, work, and have the same rights as you, as a French person, in France or wherever they happen to live or work. nobody is guaranteeing me that in 3 months' time I'm not going to lose my rights overnight. So what's going to happen to all of us? We're expats. Nobody talks about it because the British media is so absolutely Europhobic. They only treat migration as if it happens one way into Britain. Nobody ever talks about the fact there's 2 million of us out who are freaking out.
Alexandra Swan, what'll happen? Will there be visas, work visas for all the British who live in places like Britain, France, Spain and Portugal?
I think that's such a disingenuous comment to make. I used to work and live in Brussels. To say that people in Britain think migration only happens one way is completely untrue. We just want to have control over the people who do and don't migrate. We're not suggesting that if we leave Europe, we should kick out all Europeans living here. Of course not. No one is suggesting that.
I've heard it.
The idea that people
from
didn't...
UKIP.
No, they're
I've
not.
heard it from UKIP on Question Time last week. I heard it from UKIP.
Yeah, well, UKIP, you know, everyone should ignore UKIP. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. Frankly, UKIP are never going to be in power, so it really doesn't matter. But look, you know, people lived and worked abroad in Europe before we were a member of the European Union, and it's in no one's interest, not, you know, angry European countries if Britain leave. There's absolutely in no one's interest for us to stop the ability to live and work abroad. It's just not going to happen.
Well, but it's creating sort of panic, the same reason that you're worried and you're thinking about becoming French. The same is happening in the UK. People are thinking, well, maybe I should become British. People are thinking, maybe I should move right now. It's creating knock-on effects on immigration because people are anxious about what's going to happen, and migrants, which might have been living in the UK and happy to be there for a couple of years and go back home, now are thinking, well, maybe I should become British. So, you know, it's in no one's interest to remove ourselves from Europe.
The whole point of most of the anti-EU rhetoric that you read in the very Europhobic British press, I do a European press review, I read all the papers every day for the last 20 years, the British press is incredibly Europhobic. The whole point behind most of people's reservations about Europe is that they feel that too many people have come into Britain recently to take jobs. So if Britain is withdrawing from the European Union, it's most people are going to say, well, why should we continue to let people come in and work? That was one of the reasons we wanted to get out in the first place. So if the British start throwing out all the Poles, the French people who work in the United Kingdom, why on earth would countries like France continue to let us work here?
I hear Alexandra Swan sighing. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.